The child was critically ill and wanted to see him, so he left me alone on the winding mountain road in the heavy rain. Later, I decided to divorce him. He asked me impatiently why I was fussing over a child. I looked at him and said extremely calmly, her child is okay, but mine is gone. 01 My mother had been urging me to get married ever since I graduated from university. Whenever she was free, she would bring it up. It was a must-talk topic every week and she kept urging me for 3 whole years. I really couldn't bear it anymore and agreed to her. Then, on this only blind date, I met Victor. I can't describe my shock. He had always been someone out of my reach and also the person I had secretly liked for as long as 9 years. But I never dared to let anyone know because he had his princess, Chloe. I'll always remember that after the college entrance examination, Victor got the first place in the whole city. During an interview, the reporter asked him if there was anyone he wanted to thank. He suddenly held Chloe's hand and said, "Thank my girlfriend Chloe. I hope to climb the next mountain with you in the future." I sat beside the TV watching his confession and couldn't say a word. Indeed, Chloe was the second in the whole school and the 8th in the whole city, while I was someone who had to try my best just to barely make it into the top 50 in the city. I originally thought they would always be together. Perhaps there were just too many mountains in life, and they still drifted apart. When Chloe was a freshman in college, she was spotted by an agent and debuted. By her junior year, she became very famous and then broke up with Victor. When I learned about this, I didn't feel much. But on many nights, I remembered that when I had average grades and was at the bottom of the class in high school, the head teacher said that no matter what, I couldn't get into a good university. Victor stood up for me and said to the head teacher, "Whether I can get into a good university or not isn't up to you." It's really disappointing for a teacher to say such things. Later, he lent me his notes to read. Whenever I asked him questions, he always answered them thoroughly, but I knew he was just kind-hearted. I had never ignored the amazed look in his eyes when he saw Chloe in a blue pleated skirt. I didn't dare to let Victor find out my feelings. I was so afraid that in the end, we couldn't even be friends. Until their relationship was discovered by the head teacher, and the head teacher even called the parents of both of them because of this. Since both of them had good grades, they were just scolded. People in the class were all guessing who had told on them. Until a boy shone a fluorescent pen on my notebook and revealed the sentence, "Don't like Victor." The notebook was very thick, and there was such a sentence or something similar like, "Never like Victor." "I mustn't fall in love" on every few pages. Those obscure and uneasy words were written by me with an invisible pen. When I entered the classroom, I heard that boy reading them word by word in a cadenced way. My self-esteem was stripped away layer by layer. Everyone was looking at me. Chloe stood up, wanting to question me. Victor held her back and then snatched the notebook and put it on the table. He didn't look at me throughout the whole process. For a while, everyone in the class started to stay away from me. I didn't go to find Victor again either. Until one afternoon, when a few people were talking about that matter again, I heard Victor stand up and say, "Don't talk nonsense without evidence. This matter is over." Only then did my situation start to get better. I wanted to explain to him, but I didn't have the chance. I wrote him a note to explain, it really wasn't me. He replied, "Don't do this again in the future." At that moment, my hands were shaking. I didn't know what to say, but at least he had explained for me in front of others. However, he really believed that I had done it. On the day when we went to get the admission notices after the college entrance examination, we met under the big banyan tree in the school. I went to explain to him, "Classmate Victor, I didn't do that thing." I could hardly call out his name. It seemed that it would be very embarrassing to say these 2 words from my mouth. He smiled at me and said, "It's all in the past." I was stunned there and couldn't even force a smile on my face. He patted my shoulder and said, "Penny, come on. Penny, goodbye." A gust of wind blew over, and large numbers of banyan flowers were blown down. I watched his gradually disappearing figure and silently said, "Goodbye, Victor. We probably wouldn't meet again in the future." Later, I learned about all kinds of things about him from classmates and in classmate groups. He was climbing one mountain after another and shining brightly on the mountaintops. I tried my best and was admitted to a 211 university and lived an ordinary life. I had to work really hard even to get a scholarship. I knew early on that we were different people. When I learned that he and Chloe had broken up, I was quite shocked. I had originally planned to completely forget about this matter, but in the end, I still couldn't help logging into that account that I hadn't used for a long time. The first message in it was still an anonymous message between us. In the second year of high school, Victor broke his leg in a car accident. Many people said that he definitely couldn't keep his first place position. I felt very uncomfortable when I heard that. I sorted out my class notes every day and wrote them down word by word in regular script. Usually, I wrote very sloppily for the sake of speed, but I was afraid that he couldn't read clearly, so I specifically imitated regular script and sent them to him on time every day. At first, he thanked me. Later, he kept asking me who I was. He kept guessing, and I kept avoiding the question. I didn't really want him to know. A week after learning that he was dumped, I thought it would be the last time. I sent him some comforting words: keep climbing the mountains, and you'll always meet that person again on the mountaintop. He asked me, who on earth are you? It doesn't matter. It's all in the past. And then I never clicked on that account again. Later, after graduation, I became a sales supervisor in a cosmetics company. Because of my mother's urging to get married, I met him again. He didn't seem as energetic as before. We sat in a coffee shop. A simple, long time no see sounded so distant. We each talked about what we had experienced over the years. Regarding his experiences, I more or less knew about them. Regarding mine, I felt that there was really nothing remarkable to talk about. I didn't know what to say. These years of mine seemed so boring without any highlights or shining points. I briefly talked about where I graduated from and where I worked. He also listened with little interest. Until I brought up the past again. I still wanted to explain that I would never do such a thing. He was stunned, and there was an indelible sadness in his eyes. He said, "It's been such a long time. Let's not mention it." I nodded hesitantly and picked up my coffee and drank it. It tasted bitter in my mouth. Suddenly, I remembered that I had forgotten to add sugar. The second time we met, we made an appointment at a restaurant. I roughly remembered his preferences and ordered a table of dishes. He was 20 minutes late, saying that there was a traffic jam. I smiled and didn't say anything. He looked at the dishes on the table, was stunned for a moment, and said, "These are all my favorites." "Really?" I just ordered randomly. He had a great time eating that meal. In the evening, we took a walk together. On the way, he sent me home. He suddenly held my hand and said, "Penny, shall we give it a try?" I looked at him in surprise and then nodded. When I got home, I couldn't sleep all night. I was actually with Victor. My mother asked me how it was going. I didn't hide it from her. I just lowered my head and said, "I'll give it a try with him first." "What do you mean by, give it a try? Where else can you find someone as good as Victor in the future? You should hold on tight," she said with a tone of hating that I couldn't make good use of the opportunity. The third time we met, Victor directly asked me if I wanted to get married. I knew his mother had been urging him like crazy. I really wanted to ask, "Do you really like me? Are you really with me because you like me or even love me?" But when the words came to my lips, looking into his eyes, I just couldn't ask them. I hadn't met the right person in these years. People around me were getting married one by one. I was already 26. I wasn't a child anymore. Why should I ask these questions? At least Victor was the person I liked. When we got married, my mother asked for 300,000 yuan as betrothal gifts. I was completely stunned. She had never mentioned it to me before. I had never thought about it, but she just asked for it. Victor didn't say anything and transferred the money to her on the spot. At that time, I just felt that I couldn't face him. Fortunately, I had saved about 200,000 yuan from working over the years. I gave him that card and promised to give it back to him within 2 years. He didn't take the card and just said, "It's what should be given." On our wedding night, he was very drunk. He looked straight at me and then touched my face and said, "Penny, I didn't expect that we would get married." It wasn't a very satisfactory wedding night. Except for the pain, I didn't feel anything else. At the end, he said with great surprise, "Penny, have you never been in love before?" I turned my head away and didn't look at him. It was really painful. It was completely different from what was described in novels. I went to the bathroom and clicked on that account. I saw an anonymous post that said, "I didn't expect that getting married would become a business deal." I felt my legs go weak. He actually thought like this. But I didn't even have the courage to question him. Tears couldn't help but want to fall. I could only keep washing my face. When I went out, he might be a bit sleepy and had fallen asleep. I went to the study. The moment I closed the door, tears couldn't be controlled and fell down. 02 Maybe it was because of age, or maybe it was something that everyone had to go through. Both my mother and Victor's mother were urging us to have a baby. One day, when we went to Victor's old house for dinner, his mother probably couldn't hold it in anymore. She brought me a bowl of fish soup and said, "Penny, look how thin you are. You should eat more. Otherwise, how can you have a baby?" This was the first time her mother had talked about this topic so directly. I didn't answer and just lowered my head to drink the soup. She suddenly changed the topic and said, "When are you two planning to have a child?" I felt a bit restless. Just as I was thinking about how to answer, Victor came over and said, "Mom, we're not in a hurry yet." It seemed that he didn't really want to have a baby with me. Then what was the point of our marriage? Were we just living together? I liked to avoid problems when I encountered them, so I stopped thinking about this question. Anyway, I had recently won the election to be a manager. The boss asked me to work hard. I quickly saved another 100,000 yuan. Adding the previous 200,000 yuan, I remembered that anonymous post and kept thinking about it. When I gave the card to Victor, the situation was different from what I had expected. His face looked extremely unpleasant. It must have been hard for you to save for so long. I don't need it. Spend it on yourself. After saying that, he ignored me and just walked away. Not long after that, he put my name on one of his valuable houses in the city center. After that, we were in a cold war all the time. Until our third anniversary, I wanted to ease the relationship between us and invited him to celebrate the anniversary together, but he stood me up. Then I saw him on the hot search. In the evening, I sat on the sofa and turned on a desk lamp. I had never questioned him like this before, but this time, I remembered the dishes that had gone cold again and again, just like my heart that had been let down time and time again. He opened the door and came in, bringing in a gust of cold wind. I couldn't help but shrink back a little. He picked up the blanket on the sofa and put it on me and said, "Why aren't you going to bed yet?" I wanted to ask him, but before I could say anything, he said first, "It's not what was said online." On my way here, I ran into Chloe who was drunk. Suddenly, I couldn't bear to listen anymore. I interrupted him and said, "It's okay. I'm a bit sleepy." Then I got up and walked towards the bedroom. He suddenly said behind me, "Why would you care about these things? You just get what you want." When one is unlucky, even drinking cold water can make one choke. The spokesperson hired by our company turned out to be Chloe. I was the person responsible for receiving her. She called my name and said, "Miss Penny, I'm a bit inconvenient. Could you help me put on her shoes?" Then, in front of everyone, I crouched down to put on her shoes. She whispered in my ear, "Do you think you're really worthy of him?" I looked up at her arrogant look and suddenly felt very annoyed. I mouthed back, "None of your business." There were many reporters outside waiting to interview her. Victor sent me a message saying that he would pick me up from work today. My marriage life, which had previously lacked confidence, gained a little confidence because of his words. Then, I don't know who recognized him. Those reporters were about to rush in. Victor quickly ran away. Chloe reached out and grabbed his sleeve, and they ran together. The lights were flashing everywhere, making my eyes a bit dazzled. I touched my face and found that at some point, a tear had fallen there. People around were sighing, "How nice. So romantic." The love escape of the female star. Just like their love story many years ago, as bystanders, we sighed and said how well matched they were. The love between top students. But this time, it seemed that my identity wasn't that of a passerby. I was the vicious female supporting role who blocked the beautiful love of the protagonists. I was a bit distracted and was knocked down to the ground by someone. Someone stepped on my wrist, and it hurt terribly, but I didn't even have the strength to cry out in pain. When the crowd dispersed, a colleague of mine asked in a daze, "Penny, is that your husband?" With this sentence, everyone around looked at me. I felt so stuffy in my chest. I calmed down my emotions and forced a smile and said, "How could it be? You must have mistaken him." I didn't even know how I got through the work in the afternoon. I finished it like a walking corpse and then went home. I walked aimlessly in the community. I didn't dare to go upstairs. I was such a coward. I really didn't know how to face him. What should I ask? Should I ask him why he left me there today and ran away with Chloe in that big escape? I just walked like this until the sky turned gray and the street lights lit up one by one. At the moment when the street lights lit up, Victor suddenly appeared in front of me. I immediately turned around and wanted to run. He said in an unhappy tone, "Stop." I ignored him and quickened my pace. He quickly took a few steps forward and grabbed my hand, which was the one that had been stepped on this afternoon. I cried out in pain. Only then did he notice. By the dim light under the street light, he saw that my wrist was already swollen very seriously. I hadn't had time to deal with it today. I was a bit annoyed. After all, my body was my own, and I still had to work tomorrow. Victor's face became even uglier. "How did this happen? When did it happen?" I looked at him sarcastically and said, "How could you still notice me with your eyes?" He was choked by my words but didn't get angry. Instead, he suddenly picked me up. I patted his shoulder with my uninjured hand and asked him to put me down. There were colleagues I knew in the community, and I was afraid of being seen by them. He turned a deaf ear to me, just carried me to the parking lot purposefully, and stuffed me into the passenger seat of the car. Then he fastened my seat belt and drove me to the hospital. On the way, he held the steering wheel and didn't look at me and said, "That time on the hot search, Chloe was drunk and there was no one around her. I was afraid that something would happen to her, so I sent her." This time, the reporters recognized me. I was running by myself, and then she followed. He looked calm, but his hands were shaking a bit. There were beads of sweat on his forehead even in the cold winter. "She was drunk. Couldn't you contact someone else? If it really didn't work, you could also call the police. The reporters recognized you, and you just ran away with her. What's your relationship? Victor, don't you have a mouth? Couldn't you answer and clarify? Or do you think it's not necessary? Do you think you don't need to explain anything to me?" The car suddenly stopped by the street. He turned his head and looked at me in shock. I avoided his gaze. I couldn't hold back my tears. I opened the window and reached out to wipe them away. A hand stretched out, trying to hold my hand. I quickly dodged it. "I'm sorry," Victor said suddenly. I was a bit silent. Then he continued, "I'm sorry. I promise that something like this won't happen again in the future. I won't let you be wronged again." I still didn't say anything, so he had to continue driving. Soon, we arrived at the hospital. He was busy running around. My hand was swollen seriously and the skin was broken. Besides, I had a bit of a fever. The doctor suggested that I should have an intravenous infusion, which would probably take 1 or 2 hours. After that, Victor told me that he needed to go out for a while. When he came back, he brought me hot porridge. I reached out to take it. He smiled and said, "Can you eat with one hand? Do you think your husband is dead?" I ate that meal a bit awkwardly. On the way back, when I just opened the car door, there was a big bunch of red roses inside. He said beside me a bit uneasily, "We got married in a hurry. There are many things that couples should do but we haven't done yet. Penny, would you like to continue to experience these things with me?" When I got home, there was a table of cold dishes on the table. I began to realize that he was trying to make up for our relationship. Many of my married friends told me that a marriage relationship needs to be maintained and communicated. My mother said that Victor was doing well in his work and career, so he must be busy. I should understand him more. I thought that maybe we were still in the process of getting used to each other. We should be open and honest with each other. I really believed these words at that time. We started to do all the things that couples usually do. During our breaks, we went to watch movies. I leaned on him, and he held my hands tightly. Looking at his familiar profile, I couldn't help thinking of the past. I also looked at him like this in the past, but at that time, I only dared to look at him secretly. However, such days didn't last long. He began to be extremely busy. Sometimes when he came home, I could smell the disinfectant from the hospital on him. I asked him where he had been. He looked a bit uncomfortable and said, "I went to visit the sick employees." I was a bit suspicious, but then I thought, was I being too suspicious? Could he cheat on me in the hospital? My mother saw that our relationship had improved, so she urged us to have a baby more frequently. She even asked if it was my problem and whether I should go for an examination. I asked her angrily, "Why don't you suspect that there's something wrong with Victor?" Victor's mother also started to say, "You two are still young. It's easier to recover after having a baby at this time. I can also help take care of the baby." I was a bit helpless. Why did everyone come to ask me about this kind of thing? Why did Victor seem to be outside of all this? It seemed that having a baby was something that I could do alone. I had been promoted to manager for a while, and the position of vice marketing director was vacant. I wanted to compete for it. My mother said, "How can the little money you earn compare with Victor's?" The annual salary of the vice director was more than 350,000 yuan. This money was earned by myself. Since I married Victor, I had never asked him for money. However, once I got pregnant and had a baby, I definitely wouldn't have this opportunity. In the evening, when I went home, Victor came to pick me up. We took a walk in the park beside our community. A few children were running around and playing. One little girl fell down, and I went to help her up. At that moment, I happened to look at Victor. We were both adults, and the atmosphere became a bit tense. He suddenly hugged me tightly. I thought he wanted to talk to me about having a baby. I was thinking whether I should sacrifice my career and agree. But then I suddenly heard him say, "Penny, let's not have a baby for now." At that moment, my heart completely cooled down. I was so ridiculous. The thought of self-sacrifice was extremely ridiculous. However, fate always likes to play tricks on people. I got pregnant. When I learned the news of my pregnancy, I sat on the bench in the hospital, unable to say a word and not knowing who to tell. I touched my face and found a tear there. I had thought about having an abortion. I was wondering whether I should tell Victor about it. I thought that this child wouldn't be in this world for long. I tried my best to eat some delicious food, but I couldn't help crying while eating. She had just come into my belly, but I was thinking of getting rid of her. Moreover, I don't know why, but as I grew older, I felt lonelier and lonelier. I didn't know why it had come to this point, and there was no answer. Victor came back very late at night for many consecutive days. I wanted to talk to him about this issue, but every time he came back after I had fallen asleep, and when I woke up, he had already gone to work. He seemed to be extremely busy. Until another weekend, his mother urged us to go back to the old house for dinner. The old house was a villa on the hillside. I tentatively brought up the topic of the child. After just saying a sentence or two, he suddenly got angry and said, "Penny, isn't it good for us to live like this? Do you know how complicated it is to raise a child? What if the child gets sick? Can you bear it?" He lashed out at me. I was stunned on the spot. It started to rain heavily outside. His cell phone lit up several times. Someone was calling. I caught a glimpse of the name, Chloe. I felt my blood turn cold. He saw my gaze and quickly said, "It's not like that. It's not what you think, Penny." I wanted to question him, but I couldn't say a word. Tears were already streaming down my face. Then the phone rang again. The person on the other side kept calling. Then there were WeChat messages. Victor clicked on them. There was a child's voice message, "Uncle Victor, it hurts. It hurts. I want to see you." Then came the next voice message, "Victor. What should we do? The baby is dying. I want to see you for the last time." I felt cold all over. Did Victor and Chloe have a child? However, it wasn't what I thought. Victor explained to me that Chloe had an illegitimate child and had never dared to expose it to the media. The child had leukemia and was very pitiful. I suddenly realized that it wasn't that he didn't like children or didn't want children. He just didn't want my child. Then he said to me again in a pleading tone, "Penny. This is really the last time." It was pouring rain outside. I managed to find my voice and said, "Do you want me to get out of the car now?" I reached out to unbuckle my seatbelt and open the car door. Victor quickly grabbed my hand. I sneered coldly and said, "Am I still in the way of you too? Penny. Could you please not argue with a child? Chloe and I are really over." As he said this, he got out of the car one step ahead of me, took a big umbrella from the trunk, and handed it to me. I didn't take it. He pried my hand open and put the umbrella in it, saying, "Penny, don't be childish anymore. That child is really seriously ill." After saying that, he put his coat on me and then drove away quickly. I threw away his coat, held the umbrella, and only felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. The rain was too heavy. Even such a big umbrella was of little use. It was very difficult to hail a taxi on the winding mountain road. I tentatively walked forward, and the pain in my stomach became more and more intense. Then suddenly, I slipped. I hugged my stomach tightly, but it was of no use. The rain blurred my vision, but I still saw the red blood mixing with the rain and spreading under me. In the heavy rain, it was very difficult for me to call for help. I reached out to touch my phone. I had to call someone for help. Suddenly, I heard a voice, "Damn. Penny. What's wrong with you?" I struggled to open my eyes and saw that it was my immediate boss, Ryan, the son of my boss. I had never gotten along with him. But this time, I didn't care about anything else. I tightly grabbed the hem of his trousers and said, "Please take me to the hospital. My child." He quickly squatted down, picked me up, and then ran frantically and stuffed me into the car. On the way, he took a blanket and wrapped me in it. His voice was a bit stuttering when he said, "It's okay. I'll drive very fast. Penny, hold on. Otherwise, if you die, all the customers you've worked hard to accumulate will be paying to me, and the little sisters in your group won't be able to escape my clutches either." He kept talking like this. 04 When we arrived at the hospital, I was quickly sent to the emergency room. After getting the anesthesia, I fell asleep within a few seconds. When I woke up, I wanted to ask the doctor about the child's situation. The doctor was a bit angry and said, "It was such a heavy rainstorm, and you fell so badly. What do you think? Your body." She wanted to continue, but when she saw my face covered with tears, she finally sighed helplessly and said, "It's okay. You can have children in the future." After the doctor left, I lay on the bed. Even though I kept telling myself, "It's nothing. Even if that child was born in such a family, he or she wouldn't be happy," I still couldn't help feeling sad. I didn't protect my child well, and I also humiliated myself. Why did I marry Victor? He had clearly said not long ago that we should live a good life and that he wouldn't let me be wronged again, but as soon as Chloe was involved, all his promises disappeared like the wind. Ryan asked me for Victor's phone number. He wanted to call and inform him. I tried my best to smile and answer him, but I could only force a bitter smile and said, "Thank you. I'm okay here. You can go and do your own things. I'll go back to the company as soon as possible. I won't compete with you for the market share in East China this time." Ryan rolled his eyes at me and said, "You're not a love-struck fool, are you? Still being touched by yourself? Let me tell you, you must tell your husband about this. You've suffered so much." Forget it. I understand. After all, you're so old, have little dating experience, and got married in a hurry. I couldn't stop you back then. This time, you really have to listen to me." Suddenly, he sat down and earnestly held my hand and said, if he hadn't really helped me, I really couldn't control myself and would have quarreled with him. He had always been very sharp-tongued. I still remembered that when I told my colleagues in the company that I was going to get married, he stopped me after work and asked me if I had never seen a man and got married so soon after the blind date. I patiently told him that it was someone I had liked for a long time. He continued to say in a sarcastic tone, "How long have you liked him? Have you had any contact with him? Do you know him? Aren't you too old to still act like a little girl?" His words made me so angry that I almost exploded. I retorted, "It's none of your business." Then he didn't say anything. But after that incident, I didn't even accept the wedding gift he gave me. He threw it in my cabinet. After I returned it to him once, he threw it back again, and then I just ignored it. And now that he had seen me in such a mess, he would have more material to taunt me in the future. Ryan saw that I didn't say anything and continued, "You're not really like this, are you? Your husband won't feel sorry for you if you do this. He's the one who left me by the roadside." I said calmly. "Huh? Are you hungry? I'll go and buy you something." He was a bit embarrassed and didn't know what to say, so he used this excuse to go out. Not long after that, I received a call from Victor. I hung up, but he called again. After I hung up several times, he finally stopped calling. I leaned against the head of the bed and emptied my mind. Soon, my mobile phone received a call from an unfamiliar local number. As a salesperson, I couldn't miss any customer's number. I calmed down and answered the call. Then came the voice that I least wanted to hear at present. "Penny. What on earth are you doing? Why do you involve innocent people?" I said it was the last time. "Why are you so vindictive?" It was the first time I saw him so angry. I listened silently. He continued, "Do you know how much harm this will do to the child?" I couldn't bear to listen anymore and interrupted him, "Let's get divorced. I'll wait for you at the Civil Affairs Bureau on Monday." After saying that, I hung up the phone. Then I saw a push message of a Weibo post. I clicked on it and saw, "Breaking news, Chloe's child." I knew he thought it was me. I stayed in the hospital for 2 days. After being discharged, the first thing I did was to rent an apartment. I couldn't stay with my mother for the time being because she definitely wouldn't want me to divorce Victor. I was so tired that I didn't have the energy to persuade her. After renting the apartment, I went back to the home I shared with Victor to get my things. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Victor sitting on the sofa. When he saw me, he quickly got up and said, "Where have you been these days? You didn't answer my calls." "I'm here to get my things. Don't be late on Monday." I ignored him and went back to the room to pack. He chased after me and continued, "Penny, you're an adult. Can you just casually mention divorce?" I turned around and looked at him. Suddenly, I realized that he seemed different from what I remembered in these years. It was just my love that had added a layer of light to him. He was just an ordinary man, a stupid ordinary man. His light, his achievements on the mountains, couldn't bring me anything. Such love was really too tiring. I didn't want to always look up to others. I said calmly, "Yes. We're all adults. I don't want to make it ugly. I'm serious." He was silent for a while and then suddenly said, "Don't regret it." On Saturday, I moved into the apartment I rented. I was really tired these days. I was also in pain from all the running around. As soon as I lay down, Ryan called and asked me to open the door. As soon as I opened the door, he was there. I was so tired that I said, "President Ryan, it's my private time now." He blocked the door with his foot, carried big and small bags of things, and came in. "Penny. I stayed in Guangdong for a while. Would you like to taste the soup I cooked?" He completely ignored what I said and just walked in. I stared at him. His face was gloomy and he didn't say a word. He put down the things and looked me up and down, saying, "TSK TSK. Penny, look at your face. People who don't know would think you don't have many days left. You're as pale as a ghost." My eyes just happened to see myself in the full-length mirror in the living room. Ryan's mouth seemed to have practiced some kind of evil spell and was so vicious, but damn it, what he said was really true. I really did look like I didn't have many days left. Thinking like this, my stomach hurt even more. I ignored him and went back to my room to lie down. He could do whatever he wanted. He did accompany me to finish the meal and then left after cleaning up the kitchen. I asked him who had told him my address. He said in an extremely calm tone, "Do I need to ask others if I want to know something?" Pretending to be cool was really his usual trick. But I was really grateful to him during this period. I didn't know how to repay him either. I almost had a laid-back attitude of not worrying about debts when there were too many. On Saturday night, my mobile phone suddenly received countless calls. As soon as I answered them, there were all kinds of abuse. My friends couldn't even get through on their phones, and all kinds of unbearable abusive messages were sent in one after another. I had slept in the afternoon and my head was groggy. It took me a lot of effort to figure out what had happened. Someone had exposed online that I had reported Victor and Chloe out of jealousy in high school. Then Chloe's fans forwarded on a large scale that I was a scheming bitch, that in order to snatch Victor, I had exposed the matter of her illegitimate child. They imagined that Chloe's child was Victor's and that I was the biggest scheming bitch who had destroyed their affectionate love. Even some classmates who had been good friends with Chloe came out to testify that I hadn't been good looking back then, had average grades, and how I had secretly loved Victor in a humble way and then took revenge when my love was unrequited. Soon, my backup mobile phone rang, and it was my mother calling to ask me what was going on. Someone had smashed her windows. My mother and father were divorced. My father had seldom contacted me in these years, so he wasn't affected. I comforted my mother and told her not to be afraid. Ryan's call came right after that. He knew this backup number of mine. He said that because of the current public opinion pressure, the company was going to fire me. He told me not to go out and that he would come to find me. I quickly stopped him. There must be people downstairs. After all, someone had gone to make trouble at my mother's place. Now if any man came to find me, he would be smeared. I first found the photo of my marriage certificate that I had taken before and sent it to Ryan. I told him that if the company wanted to fire me, there was nothing I could do, but I needed some media power. I was going to speak out now. Ryan replied, "Who do those idiots think they are? Do they think I'll do whatever they want? I'll ask the official account to post this photo for you." Then I posted a message myself. Various media helped me forward it. I said that Mr. Victor and I had already been married for 3.5 years. If the child was his, then this was evidence of his affair. I was currently negotiating a divorce with him. Besides, we got together through a blind date. If he had told me earlier that his past love was so unforgettable, I would never have had contact with him. As an old established skin care product company, we didn't actually have a lot of media resources. But I bet that someone would help me. I hadn't been involved in Chloe's matter at all. In that Vanity Fair, there were many people who wanted to bring her down. In less than half an hour, my statement went viral. Finally, Victor called. He sounded very angry and said, "Penny, why are you in such a hurry? Do you know how hard it has been for Chloe to get where she is today?" My stomach hurt. I took a warm baby patch and stuck it on my stomach. I turned on my mobile phone to record and recorded how he was defending Chloe. When I thought I had recorded enough and really couldn't bear to listen anymore, I just said calmly, "Victor, I only have one request. Don't be late on Monday." Then I hung up the phone. I put on my coat and was about to go to find my mother. After all, she was old and couldn't bear this. But as soon as I opened the door, I saw a sneaky figure. I was so scared that I screamed. The other person quickly covered my mouth and said, "Penny, it's me." My mother pushed me into the room, took off her scarf and hat and said, "Are you okay? Did they bully you?" When she spoke, her eyes were red and her hair was messy, but the anxiety in her eyes made me burst into tears immediately. I had never dared to tell her before. I was afraid that she would scold me, that she would think Victor was so good and scold me for being so stupid as to divorce him. But she had come to find me across half of the city in the middle of the night. She held my hand and then said even more worriedly, "Why is your hand so cold? Have you eaten? Are you sick? Mom is here." I couldn't hold it in anymore and threw myself into her arms, crying loudly, "Mom, my child is gone. My child is gone." She was shocked at first and then patted my back and said, "Mom is here. It's Mom's fault. Mom didn't create good conditions for you and let you be bullied." My mother accompanied me back to my room to rest. She cooked hot soup for me. After drinking it, I fell into a deep sleep. I don't know how long it had been. In a daze, I heard, "Victor, is it because I asked you for 300,000 yuan that you're taking revenge? I can give the money back to you. Could you please clarify things for Penny?" "Victor, Penny didn't have a good life before. She followed a mother like me. Could you be kind-hearted and be nicer to her?" Before Victor could say anything, I heard my mother continue. This time, she changed her approach. "Victor, so what if your family is rich and powerful? Let me tell you, I'm willing to risk my life to protect my child. I'll go and sit downstairs at your company every day. I'll die at the entrance of your company. I don't believe it won't have an impact on you." I stood at the door with tears streaming down my face. Suddenly, Ryan sent me a message and asked me if I wanted to play big. The company had decided to terminate the contract with Chloe. He asked me if I dared to take a gamble and be the spokesperson. I'm in marketing, so I naturally knew what he meant. Originally, I was prepared to part on good terms. Since it had come to this, then let it be a ladder for me to move up. I couldn't break into the entertainment industry, but I wanted to make my life as good as possible. I still had my high school head teacher's WeChat. After I married Victor, at that time, still with the mentality of wanting to prove myself in front of him, I specifically went to find the head teacher and asked her if it was me who had reported Victor and Chloe to her back then. She replied to me, "Of course not. It's been such a long time. I saw them hugging each other at that time." I hadn't deleted the chat record. The head teacher also sent me a message today asking me what was going on. I hadn't had time to reply to her. Now I directly told her, I want to prove myself and hope she can help testify with that message. She replied to me that she was just an ordinary person and didn't want to get involved in these things. I sent her a screenshot of our chat and said, "Either you post it, teacher, or I'll post all the chats." If all our chat information was sent out, she would be affected. The reason I threatened her to post it was that sometimes the testimony of an outsider was stronger than that of the parties involved. I needed to create an atmosphere for this incident. Soon, I opened my computer and started writing a short essay. I had always been good at Chinese. I wrote a vivid essay about my secret love. I firmly denied the matter of reporting them and ended it with a sentence. I had always been looking at the distant stars, but forgot that I myself could also become a star. I had been working diligently in my industry. Should I lose my job because of my partner's scandalous affairs? Why? The company forwarded that statement and said, "Perfect Cosmetics was created for every ordinary girl who shines. For a female employee who is normally married, our company will never fire her because of the scandal between her husband and the spokesperson. She is the victim. She has been in our company for 6 years and has created countless values for the company. We think she is the shining female. Now we invite her to be the spokesperson." Then the head teacher's statement video went viral. After that, many colleagues in the company testified that Victor had come to pick me up at the company. By the time the whole thing was dealt with, it was already very late. I turned off my mobile phone and fell asleep. In the morning, as soon as I got up, I saw that my mother had cooked a table full of nutritious meals for me. She said with a flattering tone, "Penny, did I wake you up?" I hugged her and said in a low voice, "It's okay. I've dealt with everything." The next morning, unexpectedly, Victor was waiting for me downstairs. He had bought flowers and also a set of gemstone necklaces. He looked haggard, with red eyes and said, "Penny, I found out. The one who sent the child's photo was Chloe's rival. It wasn't you who sent it. The high school incident was a long time ago. I really don't care. But I care, Victor. Have you ever been isolated? Have you ever been discussed by a group of people every day, saying how shameless you are and how you don't deserve someone? But still, I have to thank you for not caring, which made my situation a bit better. But I'm really tired. Let's just let each other go." I didn't want to waste any more time with him. But he was still unwilling to give up and continued, "Penny, Chloe's child is okay now. We can live our own lives peacefully in the future. I won't get angry over such things anymore." I just looked at him calmly and said, "Her child is okay, but my child is gone." He looked at me in astonishment. I walked closer to him, stared into his eyes and said, "Victor, you killed her. You killed her. How can we still be together?" He reached out to hug me. I pushed him away and looked at him coldly. "Penny, don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like that." As he said this, he actually burst into tears. I sent him the audio I had recorded of him and said, "Do you want to listen to what you were saying? Are you out of your mind now? I really don't want us to make a scene." He continued, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is the last time. It's really the last time. It won't happen again." I was just pitying her because it wasn't easy for her. I thought that child was pitiful without a father. I was tired of his so-called explanations. I threatened him and said, "Let's get divorced. If you keep pestering me, I'll post this recording online." He looked at me with a bitter smile and said, "Will you stop being angry if I post it?" Then he clicked on his own account and posted it right in front of me. He was crazy. I didn't want to get entangled with him anymore and just said, "Then I'll have to go through legal procedures." He just stood downstairs and wouldn't leave. In the afternoon, it started to rain heavily. He sent me a text message saying, "Penny, you must have felt so uncomfortable when you got caught in the rain that day. I'll help you punish that damn man." I saw it without any emotion. I found a lawyer and was preparing to file for divorce. Things on the internet came one after another. Victor's actions made him receive a lot of attacks, from Chloe's fans and also many passers-by. He also received a lot of attacking messages just like I did at the beginning. Every time I saw him, he looked more haggard than before. Even his mother came to find me and begged me to help Victor. But I wouldn't be soft-hearted anymore. When I was in trouble at the beginning, no one felt sorry for me. Even I knew that as long as Victor needed, he could find a professional public relations team at any time. It wasn't my turn as a half-baked person. The reason I could fight back from a desperate situation at the beginning was just that I caught them off guard. I just wanted to end my relationship with him as soon as possible, but Victor kept pestering me. He found my old notebook. I had taken it back when we got married. He held the notebook and begged me, "Like me, okay? Penny, like me again, okay? Don't leave me, okay?" I threw that notebook into the artificial lake right in front of him. Without hesitation, he jumped into the water. He was all wet and looked so wretched as he picked up that notebook, which was already extremely old. That notebook that hid the regrets of my entire youth was even more unreadable after being soaked in water. He looked at me, with pleading in his eyes. I just said softly, "Either we get divorced now, or it'll just take a bit longer, but we'll still get divorced. You said that when I reached the mountain peak, I would meet that person. I've tried my best to reach the mountain peak. Why don't you want me anymore?" He suddenly said. I didn't say anything. However, he suddenly became emotional. There seemed to be a glimmer of light in his eyes as he said, "It was you, right? It was you, right? The anonymous person was you, wasn't it? You can't abandon me. Penny, it's you who made me unable to leave you, and now you're going to throw me away. Why are you always like this? You never said anything." He pounded on the handrail angrily. "Even if I wasn't the anonymous person, as your wife before, do you think what you did to me was moral? It was you who said that our marriage was just a business deal." He was so ashamed by the first half of my words that he couldn't even lift his head. Then he suddenly looked up at me and said, "When did I say these things? When did I say these things? Forget it. It doesn't matter anymore. Whenever I see you, I'll remember how you trampled on me. Whenever I see you, I'll think of my child." I couldn't hold it in anymore and accused him, unable to hold back my tears. He looked at me cautiously and said, "Do you really hate me so much now? Fine. But you can't refuse my property gift." After signing the papers and returning home, I felt completely exhausted. These years seemed like a dream. After my divorce, my mother couldn't tell whether she was happy or sad. She secretly went to return the betrothal gifts to Victor. Victor didn't want to take them, so she directly asked someone to help her exchange them for 300,000 yuan in cash and put it on Victor's front desk. When she came back and saw my expression, she almost burst into tears. "I've given it all back to him." "Aha! That's great." I praised her. She ignored me and went to the kitchen to cook by herself. While washing the vegetables, she muttered, "I knew how good Victor's conditions were at that time. I was just afraid that your relationship wouldn't last long. I thought that since you were willing to marry him, I should ask for some security for you. Who knew it would come to this?" I walked over and hugged her and said, "I still have a long life ahead. I can earn much more than 300,000 yuan. After the online hype died down, I received the endorsement fee from the company and was still responsible for my daily work. I'm quite satisfied with my current life." Ryan came to find me from time to time. Actually, I felt a bit embarrassed. I didn't want to ruin the job that I cherished very much because of this. Until there was a lot of gossip in the company. A mean-mouthed man came up to me and said, "Sister Ran is divorced. Just after getting divorced, you can get involved with President Xiao Ryan." I splashed the tea in my cup onto his face and said, "Watch your mouth." He was completely enraged by me and said, "Don't you think you're still a hot commodity now that you're almost 30? This man chased me when I first joined the company." I didn't agree. Now he was trying to disgust me. Just as I was about to hit him, Ryan arrived. He directly shouted at Ryan, "President Ryan, you don't really have a thing for a woman like Penny, do you?" Ryan punched him to the ground and said, "Damn it. I just like Penny. It's none of your business. Is it your place to say anything?" This caused a huge stir. Looking at my job that was on the verge of being lost, I would avoid Ryan whenever I saw him in the company. Until one business trip, it happened that Ryan was also going. I drove there, but I don't know what got into his head. He didn't even drive his car. It was another rainy day. That child, relying on being a test tube baby that came with great difficulty, Penny, I just happened to be passing by. "Can I give you a ride home?" I waved my car key at him. Ryan was standing at the door, and some rain had already fallen on him. "Ryan, aren't you coming?" Ryan quickly followed and grabbed the strap of my windbreaker. On the way, I was driving, and he said on his own, "I didn't expect that I would end up being used by you to irritate your ex-husband." Before I could say anything, he continued, "Forget it. Forget it. At least I'm still useful to you. You can come to me whenever you want to use me." I thought, what the hell? What's going on? What on earth is he thinking? I helplessly explained, "I'm already over with him." "Then why did you ask me to get in the car? Did you want to see me getting wet in the rain?" I retorted. Ryan smiled like a trumpet flower and said, "Finally, you know how to feel sorry for me, Penny." Extra story, Victor. After Chloe and I broke up, for a long time, I began to doubt myself. Why? What was wrong with me that Chloe would abandon me? Until that time when I had to deal with countless blind dates arranged by my mother and met her. At first, she was drinking coffee with her head down, not even looking at me. She didn't look up until I spoke. The look in her eyes at that moment made my heart skip a beat. I recognized her. She was the girl who hardly spoke in class back then. I even remembered that she seemed to have liked me and even liked me so much that she did something against her principles. Meeting again unexpectedly happened in such an occasion. After this blind date, we added each other's contact information and then went our separate ways. At night, lying in bed, I suddenly thought that if I had to choose someone to be with in life, then I wanted someone who liked me. I clearly remembered that on our second date, when I held her hand trembled slightly. In the middle of winter, her palm was sweaty. She also ordered a table full of my favorite dishes. She didn't even get angry when I was late. She blushed and said it was just a coincidence, but I was no longer the high school boy I used to be. Whether it was a coincidence or she had put thought into it, I knew it very well. When we took a walk in the evening, I looked down and saw the way she was looking at me. On a whim, I said, "Why don't we get married?" When I said it, I was shocked myself and thought it was rather presumptuous, but I didn't expect that she agreed. She seemed to be easily satisfied. I remembered that I once booked an entire floor of a hotel, filled it with Chloe's favorite flowers, and proposed to her. She just hugged me and said, "Victor, I want to fulfill my dreams. People always seem to change easily." Chloe also once said that if her future didn't have me in it, she wouldn't want that future. The 3 years with Penny were the most relaxing 3 years for me. No matter how late I came home, she was always sitting on the sofa with her laptop, waiting for me. There was an orange desk lamp left on in the living room. Her hair was half tied up, looking so gentle. She always remembered my preferences and always paid attention to everything about me. But sometimes I was also angry that she was too cautious. I'll always remember that on our wedding night, she gave me the money she had saved, saying it was to pay back the betrothal gifts. I was really angry that day. Did we have to be so clear about things between us? I had also thought about having a child with her until I met Chloe again. That day, I was supposed to go to meet Penny for our 3rd anniversary, but I saw Chloe, who was drunk, on the roadside. There was no one around her. I had thought about leaving her alone, but after all, we had known each other for so many years. I knew how much she cared about her career, so I softened my heart. Then I saw that child, Chloe's illegitimate child. The child's father was a powerful figure in their circle. I didn't want to know the reason. Anyway, that man had never shown up from the beginning to the end. That child was terribly thin and looked so humble. Having a child involves great risks. I was so afraid that something like this would happen to Penny and me. I didn't know how to accept it, so I was quite resistant whenever the topic of having a child came up. When I went back that day, it was very late. I thought Penny would scold me, but she still wasn't angry. I would rather she scolded or hit me like a normal wife instead of being so cautious. Later, I also reflected on whether I hadn't given her enough sense of security. I thought about going to pick her up from work. As a result, I encountered the reporters waiting outside for Chloe again. I didn't want to face them and just wanted to run. By accident, I ran away with Chloe. I wanted to explain to Penny, but she interrupted me. At that moment, I was a bit scared. That Ryan from her company often went to find her. For the first time, I felt a sense of panic. Chloe's child was very shy of strangers and often called me, wanting to see me. Chloe even sent me a message one day saying that she regretted it. Surprisingly, I didn't feel any pleasure. I had Penny now. But seeing that she wasn't living well, I sometimes also felt sad. After all, she had been with me during those youthful years. Chloe hoped that I would keep the secret of her child, and I agreed. Until the last time I went to see that child, it was raining heavily that day. I had originally sent someone to pick Penny up. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to see the child for the last time. It was such a pitiful child. But later, the person I sent told me that they hadn't picked up Penny. Then I saw the news online. At that instant, I was extremely angry. I had trusted her so much. I went to question her, but her voice sounded weak. The next 2 days were longer than my whole life. There were a lot of messages online that exposed Penny. I called Chloe and asked her to solve the problem. She asked me to give her half a day. Then not long after that, Penny made a statement. When I saw her statement, an infinite sense of panic subconsciously spread within me. I wanted to explain the reason to her, explain why I didn't deal with this matter immediately, and then we quarreled again. For the first time, she mentioned divorce to me. Then I witnessed how resolute Penny could be when she didn't love me. She didn't give me any time to react at all. Even at that time, I was still thinking about saving our relationship, until she told me that on the day when I left her on the road, she lost her child. That was the first time I saw her crying so miserably. I was such a scumbag. I chose to escape. I went back to the room and saw that notebook. The words written with the invisible pen were already hard to read. I used an ultraviolet lamp to shine on it page by page. All the sentences were short, but they were all the thoughts of Penny, who had been silent in those years. I immediately realized that the anonymous person was also her. I went to find her, hoping that we could still have another chance. Then she threw the notebook into the water. I picked it up in a mess. Those disappearing words were like Penny's disappearing love for me. She said that whenever she saw me there was only pain. I granted her wish and signed the divorce papers with her. She was really silly. She didn't even post the recording when it was in her hands. I posted it and soon I understood why she had been so reactive at that time. Thousands of messages flooded in online, all those dirty words that had once attacked her, who had been silent. I had never attended class reunions before, but suddenly I really wanted to know what Penny was like in the past. To my surprise, everyone didn't have much impression of her. She didn't like to talk and was always alone, lying on the desk to do exercises by herself. Later, a male classmate suddenly mentioned that he got married through a blind date. He thought there was no love in it, so he posted an anonymous post complaining that it was like a business deal. His wife found out about it. Now they're getting divorced, but he has really fallen in love with his wife. I quickly grasped this information in my mind and asked him about the time of his marriage. Surprisingly, it was on the same day as mine. I asked him if he had added Penny. He said he couldn't remember and took out his phone to look for it. Sure enough, he had her on his contacts. For a moment, I wanted him to help me explain that the message Penny saw wasn't sent by me. But when I took out my phone and saw the red exclamation mark when I tried to send a message to Penny, my heart sank completely. She didn't even want to be friends with me anymore. The last time we met was also on a rainy day. I wanted to give her a ride home, but I had long lost that chance. The end.